She called my husband in tears, telling him I was destroying his family. What she never mentioned, what she couldn't bring herself to say, was that she had never been invited. The moment we signed the papers on our new home, my in-laws had already decided they were moving in. My mother-in-law, my sister-in-law, my adult, unemployed brother-in-law. A full household of people with their own rental and their own lives who had simply concluded, without a word from us, that our home was theirs too. Not a request, not a hint, an assumption. And for months, my husband stood firmly on their side of that line while I stood alone on mine. What followed nearly cost us everything: months of brutal fights, impossible ultimatums, and one phone call that nobody in that family saw coming. This is the story of the house that almost wasn't ours. Let me take you back to where it started. My husband and I had worked years for this house. Not luck, planning, saving, sacrifice. Evenings running budget numbers instead of going out. Weekends touring listings instead of sleeping in. When we finally closed on a place that felt right, spacious, solid, with a yard large enough for our 10-year-old dog, it felt like proof that the years of grinding had actually meant something. 2 people. 1 dog. That was always the plan. His family lived across the city in a rental. His mother, a widow in her 60s who had never worked outside the home. His sister in her 30s, successful, unmarried by her own choice. And his younger brother, somewhere in his 20s and between jobs. He had been between jobs for a while. They were not struggling. They were not in crisis. They had a home, they paid their rent, and their lives were, by any reasonable measure, settled. What they apparently did not have, what none of them had been asked to develop, was a clear sense of where they ended and we began. The first sign came on a casual phone call. My mother-in-law mentioned, almost in passing, that she was looking forward to not paying rent anymore. My husband laughed awkwardly and changed the subject. I did not laugh. Then my sister-in-law, someone I genuinely liked, someone I considered a close friend, started asking about the spare rooms, not out of curiosity, out of planning. Was the second room bigger than the third? She would need closet space, as if it had all been settled, as if we'd had a whole conversation that somehow happened without me. And my brother-in-law, 20-something and unemployed, was telling his friends he was moving somewhere nicer soon. We hadn't offered a word. Not a hint, not a suggestion, nothing. But in his family's logic, the calculation was simple. The eldest son had bought a house. Therefore, there was room for everyone. Little did they know that logic was about to run straight into something it had not accounted for. The first real fight happened in November. My husband came to me after a call with his mother and said they were planning to give notice on their rental, that we needed to talk about logistics. Logistics, not a question, not an invitation to discuss. Logistics. I said no, clearly and directly and without softening it. I told him we had made no invitation, this was our home, and I was not willing to have 3 adults move in for an undefined period of time. He looked at me like I had said something cruel. These are my people, he said. I cannot just discard them. And there it was, the framing that would haunt the next several months. In his mind, my saying no was the moral equivalent of abandoning his family on a street corner. The fact that they had their own home, that his sister earned well, that none of them were in any kind of crisis, none of it seemed to move him. They wanted in. He was the eldest. Therefore, it was happening. That night, nothing was resolved, but everything had begun. Over the next few months, the picture of what my life would actually look like came into sharp and uncomfortable focus. My sister-in-law does not do housework. When she visits, she leaves dishes, leaves her things wherever they land, floats through your space like a permanent guest at a hotel she never has to pay for. My mother-in-law has always enabled this completely. At home, she cooks every meal, handles every chore, has done it so consistently for so long that her adult children genuinely seem not to know how to operate any other way. When my mother-in-law visits me, a few times a year, she expects me to run the same operation. Tea ready, meals on time, company whenever she wants it. I do this willingly because I care about her and she is only there occasionally. But visiting and living are different planets. If they moved in, I would not be a host. I would be running a household for 5 people indefinitely, on a timeline no one would define, while holding down a career and a marriage. That was not a multi-generational arrangement. That was a trap dressed up in tradition. By winter, the arguments had changed shape. We were not debating anymore. We were grinding against each other, both of us exhausted, both of us quietly resentful in ways that were starting to feel permanent. New arguments arrived every week. His mother was a widow who had sacrificed everything for this family. His brother just needed stability to get back on his feet. His sister would get married eventually. It would all sort itself out naturally. I asked him once, as directly as I knew how, what does eventually mean? 6 months? 2 years? What does getting back on his feet actually look like? He had no answer, because there was not one, and that was the entire problem. There is a specific kind of pressure that comes when someone keeps asking you to trust an undefined timeline. It is not a plan. It is a permanent state of temporary, and I began to see something I had been avoiding. He was not asking me to consider their needs alongside mine. He was asking me to set mine aside entirely so that he did not have to make a difficult choice. Those are not the same conversation, and I was done pretending they were. The fight that changed everything happened on a Tuesday night. Something small triggered it. It always is something small. Within minutes, we were back at the center of the same argument we had been circling for months, and something in me finally broke open. I told him I was done negotiating, that I had spent months being reasonable, giving ground, searching for middle territory, and all I had received in return was more pressure, more justification, more "but they are family." And then I said what I had been holding back for weeks. If they all move in, you are choosing them over me. I need you to understand that clearly before you make that choice. The room went very quiet. I was not finished. I told him the only arrangement I could accept was this. His mother could come, just her. She was a widow and I genuinely cared about her well-being, but his sister and his brother needed to find other arrangements. That was the line. Remember that framing he used, that my saying no was abandoning his family? Well, he was about to find out what I meant when I drew one of my own. There was a long silence after that, long enough to matter. I watched my husband sit with it, the resistance, the obligation, decades of being the eldest son, the weight of all of it moving slowly across his face. And then I watched him arrive, without ceremony and without drama, at something he had probably already known. He said, "Okay, just that," not with relief, not enthusiastically, with the quiet, reluctant acceptance of a man who had finally understood that he could not give his family everything they wanted and keep his marriage intact at the same time. He chose his marriage. He told me he would call them. His mother was welcome to come. His sister and his brother would need to make other arrangements. I told him I would not be on that call. It was his conversation, not mine. I trusted him to handle it. He nodded. I could see what it was costing him. I want to be honest about this. Watching someone you love do something genuinely hard does not feel like winning. It feels complicated. It feels like watching someone grieve something they never wanted to lose. But some things cost exactly what they cost. And this was one of them. The call happened that weekend. I stayed upstairs with our dog, who pressed her warm weight against my legs like she understood that something was happening downstairs. I did not need to be in the room. I could tell everything from the sounds. It started with my husband's voice, low and measured, explaining, then a shift, his mother high and distressed, then his sister louder, sharper, then his brother, a man I had never once heard raise his voice, suddenly audible through the floor. "I heard after everything we have done for you. I heard how could you let her do this. I heard my name used like an accusation, and then I heard my husband's voice go very still and very firm. The voice he uses when his mind is made and nothing is moving it. He has used that voice exactly twice in our marriage. He used it that day, 40 minutes. Then silence. Then footsteps on the stairs. He sat next to me. Our dog immediately climbed into his lap, 10 years old and still completely convinced she is a puppy. He said his mother had cried. His sister had accused me of turning him against his family. His brother had gone silent and then hung up. Then, eventually, after everything, his mother had said she understood. She would come, just her. In the days that followed, the fallout moved through the family the way these things always do. His sister went from angry to cold to silent in that order. His brother has not spoken to either of us since. Extended relatives had opinions, which they delivered to my husband in phone calls he handled without pulling me into a single one. I will not pretend the ending is clean. It is not. The closeness I had with my sister-in-law, something that was genuinely real and genuinely good, has taken a hit that may take years to repair if it ever fully does. That is a real loss. I am not minimizing it, but I also know exactly what the other version of this story looks like. The one where I stayed quiet, let them all move in, and tried to hold it together with grace and good intentions. That version ends in the same place, just slower, with more damage accumulated and more people hurt before anyone admits what went wrong. Resentment does not announce itself. It does not arrive with a warning. It quietly eats through everything it touches, including the things you were trying to protect by staying silent. My mother-in-law will have her room. I chose that because there is a real and important difference between someone who is your family and someone who simply wants what you built. People have asked me, and I have asked myself, whether I am the villain of this story. The answer I keep landing on is this: no one here is truly a villain. My mother-in-law is a woman who raised her children with genuine love and built a dynamic none of them ever thought to examine. My husband is a good man who was caught between two families he cared deeply about and finally chose to stand in the right place. His siblings are adults who were simply never asked to fully stand on their own, and honestly, that may not be entirely their fault. And I am a woman who bought a house with her husband and wanted to build a life in it. Just ours. Sometimes justice does not arrive with fanfare. Sometimes it does not look like a dramatic reversal or a public reckoning. Sometimes it just looks like a line you drew, held quietly, at real cost, without flinching. The house gets closer to ready every week. My mother-in-law will have her room. My dog will have her yard. And my husband and I, still here, still choosing each other, will finally begin the chapter we always meant to start. If this story resonated, if you have ever drawn a line that cost you something real, drop a like. Subscribe for daily stories of people who held their ground when it mattered most.